ABC News with Wendy Glamachak. Unions say Australia Post hasn't provided any details about massive job losses from the mail service. Australia Post says it must speak to its staff before commenting on Fairfax newspaper reports that 900 jobs will go because of declining letter delivery revenue. The Communications Minister Jim Metcher, Communications Union Jim Metcher says 35,000 employees across the country are shocked to learn of the possible job cuts through the press. The Victorian government says that it's also worried by the reports that most of the cuts will be made in Melbourne. Frontbencher David Davis says it's very concerning.
Well, I think all of us heard this morning with a degree of sadness. Victoria will be advocating strongly to this federal authority and to the federal government in the interests of Victorian workers, but also in the interests of Victorian communities.
The Federal Nationals leader says that his party continues to work well with its coalition partners, despite revelations that some Liberals were boasting about internal trickery. Senior Liberals have told the ABC that they knew the Nationals would oppose changes to the fuel excise and tricked them into accepting it by suggesting that they'd instead cut the diesel fuel rebate. Warren Truss says the trickery did not happen, but he accepts there's sometimes conflict within the coalition.
We are a team, we're a partnership. It's a partnership that works very well and very smoothly, but occasionally there may be a breakout somewhere and we have to live with that. That's what happens in any family.
The Colombian government and negotiators from the FARC rebel group have agreed to set up a truth commission to investigate the deaths of at least 200,000 people in 5 decades of conflict. The announcement was made during a new round of talks in Cuba, as the BBC's Sarah Rainsford reports.
The next stage of the Colombian peace talks will focus on the rights of the victims of the long conflict. For that, both the government delegation and the FARC rebels have now agreed 10 basic principles to work around. They include clarifying the causes of the armed conflict, accepting responsibility, and ensuring that all those affected by the violence are properly compensated. It will be a gigantic task. Tens of thousands of people have been killed since the fighting began, and millions forced to flee their homes. So a historical truth commission will be established, made up of experts whose findings will help inform the peace talks. And for the first time, some of the victims themselves will be involved directly in the process.
Emergency crews are retrieving the body of a bushwalker who's fallen from a cliff south of Sydney. The ambulance service was called to Little Marley Beach in the Royal National Park this morning, following reports that a man had fallen 10 metres off a cliff. Police say they believe that he was with a group of people at the time. The operation to retrieve the man's body is expected to take several hours. A 3-year-old boy has been reunited with his family after being found in a Western Sydney street overnight. Antoinette Collins has the details.
The toddler was found wandering along Francis Street in Fairfield around 4:15 this morning. He was then taken to the local police station but was returned to his home on nearby Olive Street shortly after 9 o'clock. Inspector Robert Adams says the boy told his mother he climbed through the bedroom window to escape.
The parents only became aware that the child was missing when we knocked on the door this morning. The parents stated they have 7 children in the house and they all thought their children were together.
The Department of Community Services is now taking over the investigation. Antoinette Collins, ABC News, Fairfield.
Briefly, Wallabies skipper Stephen Moore won't play again this year after tearing a ligament in his knee in last night's rugby test against France in Brisbane. Scans overnight revealed that Moore needs a full knee reconstruction to repair his anterior cruciate ligament. He was forced to leave the field after just 5 minutes in his test as captain. Lock Sam Carter will miss the rest of the series against France with an ankle injury. Carter made his test debut last night at Lang Park. And for more news anytime, you can go to our website at www.abc.net.au/news. To the national weather now. Sydney, a few showers heading for 18. Melbourne clearing as the day goes on, 16. Brisbane partly cloudy heading for 23. Perth, a late shower or two is forecast, expecting a top of 21 there. Adelaide mostly sunny today, heading for 18. Partly cloudy in Hobart, expecting 12. Canberra becoming clear, 13 degrees. Darwin sunny and windy, expecting 32 degrees. You've been listening to ABC News.
Double J. One more time. The ABC's new music radio station is ready for your ears. Weekdays, join Mick Warhurst, playing you the music you've loved and the music we reckon you're going to love. Double J. On your mobile via the ABC radio app, online at doublej.net.au, or look for Double J on your digital radio or TV.
Grandstand AFL.
Grandstand AFL.
Live and commercial free.
You're with Grandstand.
Yes, good afternoon everybody. Adam White and Lindsay Gilby with you for the next couple of hours as we reflect back on last Wednesday night with new inductions into the AFL Hall of Fame. We had Matthew Richardson, Anthony Koutoufides, Brad Johnson, Warren Tredrea, Andrew McLeod and also Ern Henfrey join an illustrious list. And Lindsay, as I welcome you, coming all the way back from Adelaide to be in the studios with us this afternoon. 5 of the 6 modern-day greats, 5 of the 6 you actually played either with or against.
Yes, I can't say about Ern. I would have been struggling if I played against him. But yes, I did play, and looking at those names, they're all fantastic players and well-deserving in their own right, and having to played with one as well. On him in certain occasions in regards to training, but be lucky enough to play next to him, and an absolute superstar.
We'll talk more about Brad Johnson a little bit later on when we hear his speech. What we'll do over the next couple of hours is hear from the 5 modern-day greats and their speeches with Gerard Whateley from the Hall of Fame. And we'll actually cross over to Adelaide very shortly with Matt Clinch, who's actually going to reflect on Warren Tredrea and Andrew McLeod with Rod Jamieson and also Stephen Williams from our Grandstand team. It's a big week for South Australian football, so we'll do that very shortly. But just your overall reflections, if you had to pick out, I don't like to do this too, but I'm going to do it anyway. If you had to pick out one of those 5 that stood out to you, having been on the same arena as these players, was there one that did stand out?
For me, it would be Andrew McLeod.
Okay.
And when they all got inducted the other week, I got asked a similar question. But for me, he was just a star. He did it when it counted on the biggest of stages. A couple of Norm Smith medals, a couple of premierships. Probably a numerous best and fairest with the Crows. His presence on the ground of when he had the ball, his acceleration, and as a player who liked to kick the ball, his ball use from half-back, midfield, he could just turn games. Saying that, Richardson, Tredrea, Cooter, those types of guys, they could turn games from different positions with their presence, as in how big they are, but Andrew McLeod, for me, is the pick of the 5.
You played 206 games of AFL football, so you're well qualified to answer this question. What stands out to you when you're seeing an absolute great, whether it be from the grandstands, whether it be in the situation now where you're on the bench at St Kilda? What stands out for you as someone that goes, you know what, this guy is great?
Wow. Where do you start? In regards to how I would look at it, I look down at say, a Warren Tredrea. I'd look at it, he's captain, leader of the club, so he's held in high regard. How he would approach a contest, and then his end result on the game. And depending on what type of game, if it's a close game or if it's a blowout, whatever the case may be. But I would look down, and if Warren Tredrea's kicked 6 of the 10 goals and just been an absolute match winner on the day, I'd look down and go, geez, he's a really, really good player. End up being obviously a Hall of Famer. That's how I would look at a player, and doing it on the biggest of stages. Watching a lot of finals football and being involved in it. Matty Richardson probably didn't get the opportunities of those guys, along with Jono to play in the big one, but all 3, McLeod, Tredrea, Cooter, all premiership players. McLeod's done it on the biggest stage. Tredrea was a good player back in the 04 grand final. And Cooter, I think it was the 95 grand final.
Just don't talk about the 99 preliminary final. You can talk about the grand final, but not that other one.
But those guys have just done it on the biggest of stages. And I'm sure if Richo had his opportunity and Jono, they would have been no different, both well-deserving in their own rights. But that's how I would judge it on a real big stage.
Okay, before we head to Adelaide, just a reminder, so in the first hour we will hear from Warren Tredrea and also Andrew McLeod, but in the second hour we'll have Matthew Richardson, also Anthony Koutoufides. Rather than play Cooter's speech, we're actually going to replay Anthony Koutoufides with David Parkin from Friday night. It was a terrific chat with Parker, who was Cooter's main coach along the way. and they had a very interesting relationship through his playing career, and still now are very, very close friends. And then also Brad Johnson, and if we've got time, we might even try and pinch Jono for a chat if he's available. But for the moment, let's head over to South Australia. What a big week it's been. And Matty Clinch, we'll take it over from here.
Thanks, Whitey. They're two of the modern-day greats in this state, so synonymous with Adelaide and Port Adelaide. Andrew McLeod, the game's record holder, with 340 games at the Crows, but the longevity is only a small part of the story. A dual Norm Smith medalist who appeared to make time stand still on the football field, and so often on the biggest stage of all. And Warren Tredrea, Port Adelaide's inaugural captain. For 7 years, the Power's leading goal scorer in a career which registered 549 goals. But it was his professionalism off the field which set up the success that would follow. As was the case on the night, the stories continue to flow in the days that follow. And we'll catch up with two of our grandstand experts to get their reflections on Andrew McLeod and Warren Tredrea.
If I know that and I've had enough and my time is up, I don't want to hang around just for the sake of that, because if you're doing that, you're wasting your time in this game, because it's hard enough getting a kick as it is.
The best player ever to be presented on football field for Port, Warren Tredrea, has played his last game, played 255 AFL games, kicked 549 goals, played in a premiership, on the best and fairest 4 times, been an All-Australian 4 times.
I think my first game was when I was 5 or 6, so now I'm 32 now, so it's a long existence.
Throw in, Westhoff, a chance, hand pass Tredrea! Hey, it's Tredrea! He kicked another one. Handball to Evan. Port will go into attack. Evan kicks long. They need a mark Port. Calls there. Tredrea! They throw it by 3. Tredrea moves in for goal number 7. And they may have just stolen the game, Port Adelaide, in the end.
Ball on the ground. Gray's got his nose over the wall. Hand pass towards Tredrea. Wills round. Smacks the goal. Magnificent goal inside territory.
Tredrea doubles back to the goal square and marks and plays on, and Tredders kicks his 500th goal in league football with his 6th here today.
Leaps high over the back. Oh, brilliant mark in defence. Brilliant mark. Tredrea at the opposite end of the ground. You superstar.
It goes past Tredrea, but it's taken by Sean Burgoyne. Back to Tredders, who kicks round the corner. It's floating over the goal. Magnificent, and he bows to the crowd. Warren Tredrea, phenomenal.
Well, that's the beauty of Warren Tredrea and how good he is. He's the difference at the moment.
Do a kick. Tredrea's a chance at full forward. He's got the ball. Tredrea. He's on his left boot. Tredrea kicks a goal. He's happy, and he should be. It is 6 points.
There's the siren. Port Adelaide have won their first ever AFL Premiership.
What a moment for them. And Warren Tredrea, the first person he embraces as the coach.
For some people who think, the game owes you something, it owes you nothing, because the game goes on, someone takes your spot, someone takes your number. Before you know it, you start in the grandstands watching your club, and then you end up in the grandstands watching your club after you play. So it's a whole journey.
The captain of the Port Adelaide Football Club, number 16, Warren Tredrea.
I'd firstly like to thank the 22 blokes who took the field, Matthew Primus and Josh Franco, through injury. You blokes don't underestimate what you've done for us. All the backroom staff, and I reckon I'm done. Thank you.
Was there an element of destiny about this, Warren, as the kid who grew up running up and down the stands at Alberton?
If you asked me that in 202 or 203 when we choked in the finals, no. But I don't know. It's in hindsight, and you often think about it in these situations. In my career, it was all about next thing. Win a premiership, an All-Australian, or play well, what's next week? There's another person, I saw him beat someone else, and there was another challenge awaiting, and I've probably got to thank Mark for that, and the other person is Dad. We're always never happy, and not to say that it was never happy or never thankful, but it was almost the mark of a professional sportsman is to deliver time and time again, and for me it was a little bit of the planets aligning. You do the hard work, you get the reward, and I was learning a fair lesson later in my career with injuries that always wasn't the case, but you get to a stage where you're a young kid. My dad was from Reservoir in Victoria. He came over, left Collingwood after 19 games, and came over to travel the country and to see footy. He wasn't from a rich family. He got to Adelaide, and Mum ruined that, had 4 kids. So he got caught at Port Adelaide. And from there on in, it was always a Port boy. I grew up in the Woodville West Torrens area, grew up at Grange, and all my mates from St Michael's or Grange Primary School were going to play for the Eagles. And Woodville and West Torrens amalgamated early in the 90s. But I was always a Port boy. So for me, when I stayed out of the draft in 95 with a few other South Australian boys after playing in the Teal Cup, and we had some success, it was almost a stage where, hey, do you want to hang around and go onto an AFL list for the club you've always dreamed of playing for? So it was a no-brainer.
You announced yourself early in that game against Carlton at Optus Oval. It was your 8th game. You kicked 8 goals, and it jeopardised everything, as it turned out, with the knee.
Yeah, it was one of those games that everything went right. I'd been building. First year, I played in a 96 and hung around a year, played in a local premiership with all the people I always dreamed about with the Magpies, watching them go through that successful era in the SNFL. The next year thought it would happen, didn't get those rewards, probably didn't do enough hard work, and had one game, and then really went about trying to do the little things, and got a forward payment from Rob Snowden out of my salary to buy a bike, did the extra training, and played 4 or 5 games, and then that day just happened. And it's just, a lot of sports people talk about it. When things click, you can't explain it, it just happens. And then I remember looking up at the scoreboard and going, it's Optus Oval, we're playing the Blues. I played on 3 guys who were all Australians and kicked 8 as a 19-year-old. And I think I smelt the roses too much because I dislocated my knee and missed the next 6 weeks.
You spent your whole life dreaming of playing for Port Adelaide, and yet reasonably early on there were opportunities to go elsewhere. And there was Carlton and the Sydney Swans, but probably primarily there was Collingwood.
Yeah, there was. And that was at a stage where I played 97, 98 and felt from a young bloke, I may have to leave to get that opportunity. And I still remember we'd played in Perth the week before and had a good game and came up against Carlton. A week later, Brian Cunningham, the CEO at the time, and Rob Snowden, the football manager, we called him to a meeting with Jeff Motley, my manager, who was here at the time, and we sat there and said we wanted to be traded. And I wanted to go to Carlton because I felt... I was a kid who always wanted to play at Port, but thought I might have to move for more opportunity. And there were interested clubs, and the first one was Carlton. Tried to get traded, didn't happen. It's probably, in hindsight, the best trade that never worked out. And the following year, met with a couple of clubs. Sydney was one and Collingwood was another. And then Mark Williams was installed as coach, and the first thing he said to me, it was almost like I need to re-sign or, a little bit. He said, centre-half forward, yours to lose. And for a 20-year-old kid who the club had just traded out Scott Cummings, Darryl Poole was injured, and I was struggling to get in and out of the team the previous year, it was like, hang on, here's a challenge. Here's a guy going, he wants to build this around. It was in his first year as senior coach. I'd had a great relationship with him for the previous 2 years, and obviously with his time early in Port. And it was really a no-brainer. I got paid well. My mates and all my friends from school were around the corner. I bought my first house, a K away from mum and dad. In hindsight, I met my wife about 2 weeks after that non-trade, and re-signed with Port, and it was the best thing that ever happened.
You were driven, you were headstrong, you were commanding, and you were demanding. Do you think you're a hard man to play with?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt about that. I'd kick 4 or 5 goals and have a really good game. Yeah, thanks, coach, move on. How'd that guy go against him? I just didn't relax. And it was a great lesson for me in my footballing career that when I had a big knee injury later on, I just always worked on the theory, do more, do extra. I remember reading an article when Andre Agassi won the Australian Open, I think in 2001 here. He talked about the hill he did in Las Vegas, and Dad was always a classic, not to tell me what to do, just to say, have you seen this article? And I'd read it. And you always take these little bits, so he's almost feeded my obsessive compulsiveness of being a trainer. So I'd go and run on Christmas Day, and if I'd go out and have a few drinks and celebrate, I'd run the next day after Mad Monday, stuff that was probably not heard of at the time. But I was at a stage where, I'd probably fit more currently in the model right now than I was probably 15 years ago when I started. But I wouldn't change a thing because it's what was able to make me the best player I could be, and that was the biggest fear, the fear of failure. And in that time, through Mark and through the fitness people, I sourced all the information. I wanted to not die wondering, so to speak. And there were times that I didn't tolerate certain blokes' lack of professionalism and stuff, but I still think at the end that maybe people took a little piece of me, and in the end, in my journey, I was able to relax a lot over that journey too.
Did you enjoy it? And particularly 2004, which you talk about 2 and 3, and it's burnt into the psyche, but it happened in 2004.
I enjoy it now. Yep. At the time, you enjoy it, you celebrate. Back then there was no Federation Square, it was the Punt Road, so we saw the vision then. That felt like 3 minutes. I think we waited for hot chips out the back longer than this presentation, it felt like. We did the lap of honour at the MCG, that felt like 3 minutes. That's what football does to you, because there is always a new challenge. The day the team wins the premiership, the other teams are already planning for next year. And that's the bit that you can't sit back and smell the roses, and that's something that you're privileged at in nights like this, where I never thought I'd be in this situation to get something so unbelievable, because I grew up watching Wayne Carey and Dunstall and Lockett and Steve Kernahan in the state games and Carlton, all these players, Gary Ablett, and now I sit there as I'm a forward and I don't think I'm at their level, but you sit there and go, wow. But from the Port Adelaide perspective, it's a really heartfelt thing, because my 14-year football career manager, Jeff Motley, is also inducted as a player. So that means a lot. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, and you don't get to sit back and enjoy it until it's done, and then you actually get a great deal of satisfaction, because this year we've got our 10-year 2004 reunion. We're just talking with Choco then, trying to get everyone's phone numbers and email addresses so we can do it right, and that's the thing that football gives you that not many other things do.
You were two Bulls, you and Mark Williams, and he spoke about the night that he sent the team out to training and they weren't to kick it to you. I know you didn't like that. But the quality of the relationship came through as you were nearing a milestone which you didn't really think you deserved.
No, I didn't. And I was coming back off I had 4 knee dislocations. And the first time was easy. I'd missed 6 weeks. The next time it was 5. The following time it was 4. And then I dislocated my knee and had a huge amount of bone damage and cartilage issues. And I said to the doc, I'll be back in 3 because I'm sticking with the trend. But it didn't work. And on my 199th game, I played at Etihad Stadium against Carlton, kicked a late goal, and almost got to a stage where I was probably the strongest and most mentally strong in anyone that was sort of around me. It felt like if I couldn't do it and didn't believe I could do it, and I'd nearly given up. And I stood up in selection as captain and said, I don't deserve to play. Choco told me to shut up. And then I said, I don't deserve to play, hear me out. And he says, get your head around it, you're going to be Port Adelaide's first 200-game player. And that meant a huge amount. And from there on in, and had a good game. And it was slowly about almost learning to run again and building myself as a footballer again. But our relationship, we clashed and questioned each other. But yeah, certainly I think we got the best out of each other, and I've got a lifelong relationship now and friendship where we're able to share something really special.
Warren Treadray chatting to Grandstand's Gerard Whateley on stage at the Hall of Fame dinner during the week. Stephen Williams is part of our Grandstand team in South Australia, and he joins us to share his memories of Warren Treadray. Stephen, welcome. You were the coach of the SNFL Magpies where Warren started his career, but you bumped past the year before then.
I did, yes. The Treadray name has always been very big around Port Adelaide. Obviously, Warren's father, Gary, come across from Collingwood, and I played footy with Gary, and you were always interested when the sons of ex-players come through, and we were having a trial match down at Fort Largs, the police academy, actually, an internal trial, which the Magpies always did during the pre-season, and a young Warren Treadray come into that first senior trial as a wingman, so... he wasn't quite the player or the figure that he was in his latter days, but he was probably a 6'1" wingman and looked pretty mobile. And it's amazing to think that he became an All-Australian centre half forward from those days. So he certainly grew quickly in a couple of seasons. And by the time I was his coach in '96, he was the centre half forward of the team.
So 1996, John Cahill steps aside mid-season to focus on the AFL, and you take over the coaching ranks. Treadray dropped out of school in year 11, so he put everything on footy to make it. You made the grand final that year and you managed to win, in which Treadray kicked 2 goals in the victory over Central. So what do you remember about that season? And you mentioned playing the athleticism alongside him, but did you start to see a couple of the special tendencies early?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. He was always a terrific mark, and he came into the side probably as the third forward. We had Brett Chalmers and Darryl Poole, which were obviously pretty imposing sort of characters, and to have the likes of Warren just come in as that third forward probably got under the guard a bit because he was young, and the other teams didn't know a lot about him. But to kick a couple of goals on grand final day, and it's always great to hear him talk about his achievements in football, and he talks about obviously the 2004 grand final victory, but he always talks about '96 as well, which I think just goes to show what a Port Adelaide person he is. It's not all about what he did at AFL level, but he certainly remembers where he come from and his upbringing and the real joy that he had in winning that premiership so early in his career.
The Magpies went on to play in back-to-back grand finals the following year, but you lost to Norwood in 1997. Treadray made his debut in round 2 against Essendon that year, but didn't get a lot of opportunities at the senior level that year. Can you remember why that was?
It it was interesting to think back of '97, actually, particularly on grand final day, because we made the choice of going into the game with only one ruckman, and that was Brett Chalmers. And probably 5 minutes into the game, Brett went to soccer the ball off the ground and kicked the ground before the ball and did his knee, and he was out of the game. So all of a sudden, Treader's become our ruckman. So he certainly, we got beaten by a record amount that day against Peter Rhodes' Norwood side, and I think Treader's realised that he'd like to be a centre-half forward, not a ruckman, and from that point onward, he became a champion.
Stephen Williams from our Adelaide Grandstand team has joined us on Grandstand AFL to reflect on Warren Tredrea and his career as he was inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame during the week. When you think back to Port Adelaide's successful years in 2002 and 2003, they finished on top of the AFL ladder, but ultimately didn't get the dream success. But then 2004 came, and unfortunately for Matthew Primus, the injury that followed, and he was ruled out after round 3 for the rest of the season, and Tredrea took over as captain of the club. From an outsider looking in, how instrumental was he in the leadership and the direction of the club?
Oh, he was very instrumental. Obviously, losing Matty Primus was obviously a big loss. He was the premier ruckman in the competition and the absolute spiritual leader of Port Adelaide. And Warren had really big shoes to fill when we think that he took over and became Port's first premiership captain. But it must have been quite intimidating for him also to know that he was replacing a true legend of Port Adelaide in Matty Primus, a guy that was the dominant figure in the AFL almost, and to be able to step into those shoes and then just provide real leadership through the club, and probably his professionalism. You hear a lot of the guys, I can remember Kane Corns talking about it as a young kid coming to the club, and just really realising the level that he needed to get to when he sat along Warren Tredrea, and just saw how meticulously he went about preparing himself for games of footy. And I think that's one of the big things you hear about people when they reflect on Warren's career, just the level of professionalism, and he just left nothing to chance. He just worked so hard to make sure that he got the very best out of himself.
And I guess the latter part of his career where he did have knee injuries but continued to fight on, and what was a pretty dirty day for Port Adelaide supporters, the 2007 grand final where they were comfortably beaten by Geelong, but I guess Tredrea was one of the shining lights on that day and that season.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the things that's really overlooked at Port Adelaide, and also probably in Warren's career, just what a magnificent effort it was to get to where they got to. Probably if they'd been beaten in the prelim, everyone would have thought what a fantastic season it was. But they beat North by I think 70 points in the prelim, and then went on, to play the Cats in the grand final, and to lose by a record margin certainly took a lot of gloss off what was a fantastic achievement to get to that point.
Stephen Williams is with us on Grandstand as we reflect on Warren Tredrea's career, inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame during the week. He mentioned his professionalism throughout his career. Did you see that from the very outset?
Yeah, he's probably the sort of guy that wasn't, I don't know, he didn't joke around that much. It wasn't fun. It was his job. He was a professional footballer, and he was making sure that he was the sort of guy that left no stone unturned to make sure that he knew the opponent that he was playing and knew his strengths and weaknesses. He knew what he had to do to be most valuable for the side, and probably a lot of other guys didn't go that deeply into their football, perhaps enjoyed it a little bit more, but didn't probably get out of it what Warren got out of it. So I suppose there's really a trade-off there. You might think back and think, well, maybe I should have smelled the roses a little bit more than he did, but perhaps if he had done that, he mightn't have finished up achieving what he achieved in the end. So, you can probably look back and reflect and say perhaps could have enjoyed it a little bit more, but I think there wouldn't be too many regrets from his side of things.
So what is his legacy, Stephen? Warren Tredrea on a club which has had, so many greats when you think of Gavin Wanganeen, and that's just the power side of it without going through some of the Magpie greats. But for Tredrea, is he the modern-day Port Adelaide power great player?
He probably is. He's the guy that's come from, through the junior grades. You sort of, that doesn't happen in football anymore. You can't start at a club and work your way through from the under 15s, under 17s, under 19s, through the reserves, through the league team, and then play for that same club in the AFL. And a guy that's had his father play at the club. He loved the club as a young kid. He was able to do what he wanted to do as a kid and play for Port Adelaide, and then to realise that dream through the SANFL into the AFL, and then finally to be premiership captain, All-Australian. It's almost just, the fairy tale story, really.
Stephen Williams from our Grandstand team reflecting upon the career of Warren Treadray, inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame. From one South Australian legend to another.
He beats one, skirts the boundary line, bananas the ball through for a goal.
McLeod gets it, a nice little knock across from Edwards. McLeod's hand pass to Tyson. Tyson, 40 metres out, has kicked the goal.
How many times can you laud a player like McLeod? That was just phenomenal.
Congratulations. Made it.
He's a brilliant player. The winner of the Norm Smith Medal for 1997 is Andrew McLeod of the Adelaide Crows.
Long bomb inside 50, Robin, Smart, Marsh, all up, down McLeod. McLeod to Varney, he will go.
How good McLeod. The Norm Smith Medal in the 1998 AFL Grand Final is Andrew McLeod of Adelaide. And McLeod, again, has just pulled out the wand and just gone, which was very, very good.
How many dudes you know roll like this? How many dudes you know flow like this?
McLeod!
How many dudes you know got the skills to go and rock a show like this?
They're bowing. They are bowing.
The thing I've admired about Andrew is his ability to get the best out of himself, on the biggest days. And if you look at the 2 grand finals, he was our best player. He one of the night grand finals, he won the Michael Tuck medal.
We had Brereton in 89 and Ablett and Batira in 92 and Long in 93 and... well, this guy's raised the bar.
A smooth mover. Has he got the legs? He has, I think. That is a stunning effort.
Rowe goes for Adelaide by McLeod. He's kicked the goal. Adelaide are right back in this now. Here comes McLeod, tucked in the pocket, heads for home. It's long, it's close.
It's a goal! That'll get him going.
He's in the clear, outside of the right boot, kicks the goal that may well seal the game.
How many dudes you know roll like this? How many dudes you know flow like this? Not many, if any. Not many, if any.
Andrew McLeod, for me, is probably the most talented or exciting bloke I've ever played with.
48 metres out from McLeod. This one's okay.
Yeah, stalwart of the game from as far as the territory goes, and I feel right across the nation. But as far as the territory point of view goes, I really rate him as the best out of here.
From what I've seen, he's in the top 5 players I've seen nearly of all time. Wonderful balance, wonderful pace. Always used the ball beautifully well.
Cleverly backwards to Edwards, who goes out to the halfback flank, and McLeod. And what a player he has been from start to finish in this grand final for the Crows.
Yeah, great bloke to play alongside of. You knew you could count of him, and he's still got plenty more games to go.
One of the textbooks that smacks of class with a capital C.
It was the most enjoyable time watching Andrew, and after all these years I still enjoy watching him play.
Hand pass to McLeod, who does a bit of a dance. Dodges one, dodges another. Oh, thanks for coming, Andy McLeod. You are a beauty.
Tell me, Andrew, when notification of this arrived, what did you go through? What were your emotions?
It was quite interesting. I was heading out the door with my wife, and I can't remember where we were going, and something caught my eye in the letterbox, so I sort of marched over and grabbed it, and I get a lot of mail from the AFL, being a 300 game player, and I looked at the letter and I saw Tony Peake's name on the back, and I went, geez, I don't often get mail from Tony Peake, so something's going on. And walked back to the car, and my wife Rachel was sitting in the passenger seat, and I handed her the letter and said, you better open this, because if I do, I think I'm going to cry. So I got her open it, and she was like, what are you going to cry for? What's going on? And I said, well, have a look at the letter. And I'm like, no, Tony Peake. And she opened the letter and started reading it, and then for about, I guess it's like a bit like when you win the premiership, that first 15 seconds, just the emotion of it, and all these thoughts went through my head. Freaked out. There was a couple of tears, and I just was like, I've got to ring my dad. So that was probably my first instance, my first instinct. From there, ring my dad, tell him about it, and like I said, then after that emotion had settled down, I was like, whew, how good's this?
Yes. Does it hit home how far you've come? A displaced family after Cyclone Tracy and Catherine, all the way to presenting before the United Nations on the back of football, and here you are in the Hall of Fame. It's quite the journey.
It is. I often, think back and go, well, wow. A little, little podgy boy from Catherine, growing up, and got the opportunity to follow a dream, play on the biggest stage that I could have ever imagined, and play a game I loved for my career for 16 years. I couldn't ask for anything better. I've got this thing in my head that one of my mates was mentioning before about my brother always said, my dad said to me when I was a young bloke that you can't eat footballs, and as you know, can't be a footballer as a career, but proved him wrong.
Your football journey actually goes back through the generations. The genesis is your great-grandfather.
Yeah, it is, and my great-grandfather was one of the first Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander players to be registered to play. In the territory back in the early 1900s. His name, or my family name, the Armat name, is blazoned on the entrance gates at TIO Stadium. It's named after my great-grandfather. So I guess it was inevitable that I was going to play footy. He played for the Darwin Buffaloes, or back in the day, they changed names a lot of times. The Vesties, the Meatworks was part of that. And I guess it's one of those things you don't realise until you're a bit older that, I guess, what that impact is on you as a person. But back in those early days, he paved the way for myself and a lot of the other guys that have come through.
And did you always have a strong sense when you played that you were representing your community?
Oh, always. Coming from the territory, I was pretty lucky in. My favourite player was Michael McLean. Growing up, Magic McLean, and he's married to my cousin, so I was pretty fortunate that at Christmas lunches I got a bit of time with him, and I was just a pest, I guess, and asking him 100 million questions about footy and what it's like to play in the big smoke, and he was real to me. And then I had guys like Maurice Rioli to look up to, Michael Long, I saw here earlier, Gilbert McAdam, Darryl White, and the like, that were fantastic role models for me. And when I got the opportunity to pursue my dream and a career in footy, I want to be just as good a role model as those blokes were. So it was something that, and because of the impact that my family have had, and my grandfather and his story as well, that it's important for me to be able to, a little snotty-nosed kid from the territory, that I could actually do something and give other kids the aspiration to be able to reach their dreams.
You're a beautiful footballer to watch, and I don't doubt it was exhilarating to play. Can you put us inside it when it all lined up for you? Was it like playing the game in slow motion?
Yeah, it was in certain times, and it's one of those things I think as a footballer, you love to be able to bottle those moments when you could. And there were certain periods in my career that and games and moments where everything was in slow motion. And I think that's when, for me, it's when I played my best football. I felt like I was one step ahead all the time, and I could read the play, and I knew where the ball was going to go. And I was fortunate enough. I wish I could have produced more of those moments, as we all do, in our careers. That it didn't happen as often as you'd like it to do, but in those moments when it did happen, you almost felt like you were unstoppable. That you could, and that's what footy did to you. And that's what I did in the lounge room at my mum and dad's house when I used to break my mum's vases growing up, kicking socks around the house, and in the backyard, and breaking their palm trees, and used to get sworn out at the back window. But it was just the things that I was doing as a kid. in the backyard. And when I played, on some of the biggest stages in the world, in terms of, the MCG or at AAMI Stadium or wherever that was, it just felt like I was recreating those moments that I was playing as a kid.
And those 2 grand finals, which are such a part of the folklore of your career, 2 Norm Smith medals, in playing in front of 100,000 people, which would have been more than the whole population of where you grew up. How do you reflect on those 2 memorable days?
Yeah, I was very lucky that, we obviously had Malcolm at the time, who was just fantastic in, one, being able to put things into perspective and give you confidence and allow you to go out and be calm. But and that was one thing in the grand finals. I was never really nervous when I played in the GFs. I was quite comfortable because, like I said about playing those games, I'd played 100 grand finals in my mum's lounge room, and I'd been there before, so I knew what to expect, sort of. But until that moment, and then you walk out onto the MCG and there's nearly 100,000 people, and the first thing I did was go, wow, there's more people here than where I live, where I come from, and that was the most scary thing. And then it was like, oh, what did Blighty say? Oh, yep, you got to do it, soak it all up and embrace it and don't get caught in a moment. But yeah, it was just fantastic days, and you go out there and for me, and the other thing too was the pressure I always felt, because the only 2 guys that ever played in the grand final before me, one was named Maurice Rioli, one was named Michael Long, and they both won Norm Smith medals. Yep. So I sort of felt that pressure a little bit, but I think it was nice to be able to embrace it and think, well, they're 2 of my great idols growing up. How good would it be to be able to emulate that?
Andrew McLeod chatting to Grandstand's Gerard Whateley on stage at the Hall of Fame dinner during the week. Rod Jamison was a teammate of McLeod's at the Crows and part of our South Australian Grandstand team. Jamo, welcome. Let's start with the beginning of the story. Andrew McLeod was meant to be heading to Fremantle but found his way to the Crows. What were your early impressions?
Look, I can go back or take you back prior to that. I was actually in the room in London with Chris Groom when he received the phone call that the deal was actually happening. So it was unfortunate for Groomy. We were in London at the end of 94, and Groomy received a call to say that there's a deal happening and it's likely that he's going to Fremantle. And we were picking up some young bloke by the name of Andrew McLeod that no one really knew of at that particular time. And the deal did go through. So we enjoyed a couple of days with Groomy in London before he packed his bags and took off and headed to Perth.
McLeod kicked 2 goals in the 94 SANFL Grand Final win against Woodville, and then made his debut the following year in round 9, and it was some debut as well. He trailed by 34 points at half-time before rattling home, and a young McLeod was there to kick the winner.
Yeah, I recall his pre-season, one particular incident, Clinchy, too, where we were doing a tackling and a shepherding drill, and Scott Lee, who was a nuggety back pocket player, really strong, quite mature, and Bungie just came in and really just got down and just went bang, and the strength in his legs, he just hip and shouldered him and put him on his back. And I know at that time there was myself and a number of players around us. It's not like Bungie to display that type. It was just natural for him. And the strength of this kid, we just stood back and went, wow, that was impressive. But I recall the Hawthorn game that you're talking about, ironically, because I intercepted the football that particular night in defence and kicked it down in that 4-0 play. And being across the half-back line at that particular time, but I guess that was just a glimpse of what we were all going to see in the years ahead as to how the ease in such wet conditions to be able to maintain his feet, get around Ray Jenke, and then sort of just dribble, the football really skillfully on a really tight angle through the goals and contribute to a win.
So it wasn't the best season for the Crows. I think you won 9 games that season, but when most people talk about Andrew McLeod, they talk about the silky mover and the ability to make time stand still a little bit. But for you, it was a bit of the physical presence that he brought in that pre-season.
Well, again, initially it was one that we never felt like he, when you have a look at him, he's such a polite man. He's a very humble man, even to this very day. And, you could imagine back at that particular point where a young Indigenous player, they're all really quite quiet initially anyway. And he came to the club and was just feeling his way and getting involved. But the physical ability of him to be able to do it effortlessly was one that caught my eye. And then the more we got to train with him, the more he then played. And then as his career unfolded, his pace, his explosiveness, how light he was on his feet, the talent that he just embroiled, and how, whatever condition it was, he just looked like to be just gliding across the ground, and he was so elusive. And we got to see that as the years unfolded.
So in those early couple of years, Robert Shaw was your coach. And for those who didn't see Andrew McLeod play, he was a small forward predominantly in those early couple of years?
Yeah, look, he was. And look, again, as we know, even today, a small forward, it's such a difficult role. The game has changed so much, but I guess their requirement is, one, to be defensive and put the pressure on. And look, while Bungie was able to do that, back then the coach would ask for every player to have one tackle in a game, would probably win. So you're lucky to have 20 tackles in a game now. As you know, you're exceeding 50, 60 and 70 and above sometimes. So, look, it was just a tough position. At the time, Tony Modra was up forward. A lot of our forward entries would just kick the mods. We had Rennie and David Pittman and those likes that would sit in the forward line as well and be our tall targets to go to. Matthew Robran also. So it was always difficult, I guess, for a small forward in our side at that time to get a lot of the footy.
So Malcolm Blight arrives in the club at 97 and everything changes a little bit, not only for the team but for the individuals as well. How did that change for Andrew McLeod's role? We know that in the prelim final against the Bulldogs, he was thrown into the midfield and we saw the result.
Look, it was probably more so because Malcolm ended up putting in the half-back line, and that was really when, I guess, my relationship with Bungie forged a little stronger. It was, Ben Hart, Tyson Edwards, Peter Caven, Nigel Smart, Andrew McLeod, Shane Allen. Our back line really evolved, and it was around defence, yes, but it was an attacking back line, and we had a lot of run and rebound, and Bungie spent some time sort of floating through there. And then I guess when he had the opportunity, and it's well documented, in 97 when I think against the Western Bulldogs in the prelim final, they moved him into the middle of the ground halfway through the game, and he just exploded and then continued to do that in 97 on the big stage on the grand final day.
And then, of course, we come to the grand final and St Kilda desperately wanting to add to their premiership cupboard. But you also had your own history you wanted to create, and Andrew McLeod played an integral part.
Yeah, look, I couldn't imagine trying to run with him or tag him, but again, his innate ability to be able to find the football, his explosiveness from a pack, was so elusive in tight, and then add the talent that he had, the reading of the football, his foot and hand skills to be able to deliver it. And it was all touch. It was almost like a John McEnroe type analogy, Andrew McLeod, with the football and the way that he played the game, and he was really thinking about where to go and not just running to a position to hope that he would get hold of the football. And he was a player that really, I guess, blossomed in that 97 year. And then, on grand final day against the Saints, he just opened up and had 31 odd touches, I think it was, and it was awarded the Norman Smith Medal on such a big day for the Adelaide Football Club. We didn't think, we were very humble around entering into those finals campaign, Clinchy, too, and our role was, let's just beat our opponent, let's just do the job. We never felt at the time that we were a clear standard, and we weren't going into that game St Kilda was, but there was just something about us that we knew that we were a pretty good side, and if we beat our immediate opponent, that will contribute to winning the game, and Andrew McLeod was just a star.
Rod Jamison's our guest on Grandstand AFL, chatting about Andrew McLeod, who was inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame during the week. From 97, when you're out there competing, to 1998, when personally you were sitting in the stands, from a somewhat unknown player, McLeod, to an All-Australian the following year, and the expectations were much higher on him.
Yeah, look, I guess referring to 98, Clinchy, was the fact that he just really... he was one that the standards and what he wanted to display and put benchmarks in for himself were always exceptionally high. And I guess coming off the big stage in 97 to 98, and then being able to, I guess, maintain that. And you could see now he was really starting to mature as a player, and I think what that also provided was his ability to be able to perform consistently and on big stages, and now he was a player that was certainly revered for those types of games, and you weren't, from an opposition team, you just couldn't allow this particular player a lot of time and a lot of space. So they certainly, I guess, architected a lot of defensive work to him and to try and keep an eye on him. But I guess the roles where he could either play forward, midfield and or back was always very difficult to maintain him.
He finished up his career in 2010 after 5 years under Neil Craig, and he'd gone from being a midfielder to playing at half-back. 340-odd games later, what do you feel like was the key to his longevity? Because it is a large part of his legend as well, is being able to play for so long at such a consistently high level.
Yeah, look, he was certainly his preparation was meticulous, and I think even to this day he still might even have it at home. He had like an infrared sauna too, which he would spend some time in to keep his body weight and his body mass down to a level that was, really quite refined. And so he was, as most players, and maybe the top echelon do this, but they're so meticulous in their preparation in terms of their dietary, how they prepare, how they recover, what they put into their body. And Bungie was very much like that. And, even today, and he's been out of the game a number of years, he just looks like he could probably pull on the jumper and still run around. He looks as if he's playing weight. And look, I guess he's just being able to maintain it at that time. The game again had evolved a little bit more, so it wasn't the entire group that had to do every training or every session. It was started to be a little more individual. And Bungie had some issues with his right knee, I think it was, and that had to be maintained for a number of years, and he had some operations on it too. So the workload, as long as he was getting it somewhere else, and it certainly wasn't inhibiting his performances when he was playing, albeit as he got on, there was some restriction in time and games, but to get to in excess of 300 games, there's only 2% of the game or players in the game that have ever played it to get to that milestone, and he's an absolute testament to what he's been able to achieve.
And obviously right up there in terms of the greats of the Crows you got to see. You throw in Chris McDermott and Tony Modra and Mark Prosciutto, and he's in that company.
Look, absolutely no doubt. And it would be hard to split hairs. I guess two of the greatest that has ever represented the Adelaide Football Club, you'd say Mark Prosciutto, but Andrew McLeod, those two would be side by side, and the only thing that might split them would be the Brownlow to Rui. But gee, when you have a look at what they've achieved along the way, not only individual but also collectively within their team, their leadership, their longevity, how many games played, and the impact they've had in Adelaide and in the Fieldy community generally and abroad around Australia has just been phenomenal. And like to Bungie's credit too, like he's in more recent time, he's met with the Prime Minister, leading into Indigenous round, and he's been to the UN, he's presented there as well. So his skills and his demeanour and what he stands for and represents is not only being recognised, within South Australia, but nationally and certainly overseas.
Rod Jamieson sharing some of his memories of Andrew McLeod, and Stephen Williams earlier chatting about Warren Treadray. Both men now part of the Australian Football Hall of Fame. And Whitey, as we cross back to you, it's one of my favourite nights. It's a great night on the AFL calendar to celebrate and relive some of footy's biggest names and the moments which defined them throughout their career.
Thanks, Matthew, and there's absolutely no doubt about that as well. So Andrew McLeod finished his career with 340 games, 275 goals, premierships in 1997 and 1998, Adelaide Best and Fairest winner 3 times, 97, 01 and 07, All-Australian 1998, 2000, 2001, 2006, 2007, and also a member of the Indigenous Team of the Century. That's Andrew McLeod. We'll get back to him in a second, but Warren Treadray as well. He was Captain of Port Adelaide between 2006 and 2008, but a premiership player at Port Adelaide as well. He finished with 255 games, 549 goals, best and fairest winner 01, 04, 05, 09, All-Australian 2001 until 2004, and as I said, that premiership in 2004. So two of the biggest names in South Australian football in modern times. Now, we've got Lindsay Gilby here, and Linz, you got to play with Andrew McLeod in the Australian team when they played the international rules. What was it like to play with him, and did you have a different view of him playing with him as opposed to having to play against him all the time?
He was very, very quiet type of fella. Very, very proud of his Indigenous background. Just a lovely bloke, silky skills. He'd kick a Sharon like he would kick a Gaelic ball. Just a very natural guy in regards to that. He was a lovely bloke, very, very caring, wanted to know a lot about you. And sometimes in those series, players can go their own way or separate in different groups. But he really got around to, because he was captain, and just got around to get to know everyone and what they were like as people, ask them about their background. I can share one little story with you, if you don't mind. In 2005, I was lucky enough to be sponsored by Adidas and got some boots.
Not that you meant to mention that on the radio, so we'll just... Okay. One of those sporting brands.
Okay, so yes. One of those sporting brands then. And then we ventured out to that particular factory. And I've never seen a guy and his kids ravish a store like they did on that occasion. They took watches, they took, you name it, they took it, and my car was full coming home because he didn't have his car over here, so he said, can you drive me out there? And I said, yeah, more than happy to. And I felt like, even though I played against this guy and I'm playing in the international rules, I felt like a little kid taking Andrew McLeod.
Kid or a robber?
In a way. He was the robber, trust me. I was the kid. But sitting in a car next to Andrew McLeod as a guy who had a poster on my wall when I was a kid, it was quite surreal. But there was virtually nothing left in the store when we got there. But just a lovely, lovely person.
Sounds like my wife at the factory outlets, particularly in Las Vegas, with all the clothes. So Andrew McLeod and Warren Tradray. After the news, we will catch up with, I think, some of my favourite players, if that's such a word, of modern times. Think of Brad Johnson, Matthew Richardson, just not only good players, but just
great people.
Yeah, good people, entertainers, and Anthony Koutoufides was certainly one of those as well. So we'll hear from Matthew Richardson's speech from the Hall of Fame. We'll also hear from Brad Johnson from the Hall of Fame, and also Anthony Koutoufides. Rather than actually play the speech from last Wednesday night, we'll actually replay the chat he had with David Parkin, because that's definitely worth replaying. And you could just tell, Lindsay, that Parko was a little bit frustrated at times early in Anthony Koutoufides' career, because he for a while they just couldn't get the best out of someone that obviously had all the attributes to be a terrific footballer, but probably needed to learn a little bit more about the game first.
Yeah, you're right. And having a conversation with Parker a few weeks ago, I think the turning point for Kuta was when he threw him up onto the wing and virtually said, go out and play. And hearing him say that himself, that was the turning point of his career. And he went out there and just dominated games. It's very rare that, especially in times, that an athlete, as such he was, to come out and play footy as good as he does as well. You look at a lot of athletes these days who are playing league footy, they're good athleticism, but they struggle on the footy side of things. He ended up capturing both, and he had both. He was a star of a player.
Matthew Richardson was a little bit the same, wasn't he?
Similar.
In the sense that he was able to finish his career on the wing. He still finished with 800 goals, but that athleticism was able to come out later in his career further up the ground under Terry Wallace.
And that's what made him such a good player. You can be a great player and sit in the one position, but to dominate in a couple of different positions just shows you how good a player you are. I remember playing against him on the wing. He was kicking 3 or 4 goals a week just from the wing, because you couldn't have a match-up for him. I remember playing against him, and Brian Lake would have him at full back, and then suddenly if Brian had him under control, he'd go to the wing, and we couldn't put Brian on the wing, and Nathan Egan was too small for him. So we didn't have a match-up, and you virtually just hope to get it to ground.
Okay, a bit more of Richo, Cooter and also Brad Johnson shortly. Just a reminder, there are 3 games still to come in the AFL. We'll have score updates shortly from Gold Coast and Sydney. A little bit later on, it's Fremantle and Adelaide in our first match for broadcast. And then at Docklands, Sunday night footy, North Melbourne and Richmond. That's all to come. You're listening to Grandstand AFL.
ABC News with Wendy Glamochak. Good afternoon. The Australian Medical Association fears that even fewer doctors will visit nursing home patients if the government's $7 Medicare charge is introduced. The association says that GPs stand to lose $11 for each patient if they don't collect the new fee. The Victorian president of the AMA, Dr Tony Bartone, says that's because doctors will no longer receive incentives to bulk bill, but they'll instead be given a low gap incentive if they collect the charge. He says doctors don't want to ask nursing home patients for $7.
GPs have been visiting nursing home patients despite falling rebates for a long time. Anything which further reduces the ability for doctors to continue to see patients at nursing homes has got to put further pressure on the system.
The acting Prime Minister Warren Truss says he hasn't been informed about any job cuts at Australia Post. The organisation says it must talk to staff before it confirms or denies Fairfax newspaper reports that 900 jobs will go because of falling letter delivery revenue. Australia Post recorded a $218 million loss last financial year. Mr Truss says the organisation is clearly facing a crisis.
My understanding from what I've read in the newspaper is that the job cuts that are being proposed by Australia Post are in their head office in Melbourne and Sydney, but in reality there will be a need for Australia Post to review its business model in the light of the services that people expect in the future.
The Victorian Labor opposition will push on with a move to expel Balance of Power MP Jeff Shaw from the Parliament after seeking legal advice. Labor will move a motion on Tuesday to remove the Frankston Independent over the misuse of his taxpayer-funded car and fuel card. The opposition's scrutiny of government spokesman Martin Pakula says according to legal advice, Mr Shaw would earn $150,000 if he was suspended rather than expelled.
The power has been exercised previously, and yes, this is a big step. The opposition does not deny that, but the actions of Mr Shaw are unprecedented. The fact is, we believe the circus has to end.
The coalition has indicated that it's unlikely to support the motion. It says that it will continue to seek its own legal advice. South Australian police have recovered the powerboat involved in yesterday's fatal accident at Murray Bridge. Rosemary Tierney reports.
The boat, Pure Gold, was winched from the river at around midday. Police are investigating what caused it to veer off course during the SA Ski Racing Championships at around 1:30 yesterday. The boat slammed into willow trees and then burst into flames. A 57-year-old Victorian man who was observing a skier died. His 57-year-old driver, also from Victoria, suffered serious burns and was airlifted to the Royal Adelaide Hospital. Day 2 of the event was cancelled this morning as a sign of respect. Rosemary Tierney, ABC News, Murray Bridge.
Overseas security is tight in the Egyptian capital Cairo ahead of the swearing-in ceremony of the new president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. He won last month's elections by a landslide, although turnout was below 50%. The elections came less than a year after Mr el-Sisi deposed the Islamist president, Mohamed Morsi. The BBC's Orla Guerin reports.
Security forces have been deployed at key locations around the capital in preparation for the ceremony. Even before winning the election, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi was the target of 2 assassination attempts. His swearing-in comes almost a year after he ousted Egypt's first freely elected president, Mohamed Morsi, following mass protests against his rule. Supporters hope Sisi will deliver security and economic growth. Opponents, and he has plenty, fear his election marks a return to authoritarian rule.
The head of the Australian Rugby League Indigenous Council, Linda Burney, says it's unacceptable that Rugby League commentator Warren Ryan doesn't believe he's caused any offence over an allegedly racist remark. Ryan has resigned from the ABC a week after being stood down from his commentary duties over a reference made on air during a Rugby League broadcast last month. The 73-year-old says he won't be apologising because there was no offence intended and it would be insincere. Ms Burney says if Ryan can't see that his comments are unacceptable, then it's timely he's tendered his resignation. The national weather now: Sydney a few showers 18, Melbourne clearing 16, Brisbane partly cloudy 23, Perth a late shower or two 21, Adelaide sunny 18, Hobart cloudy 12, Canberra becoming fine 13 and Darwin sunny and windy heading for 32 degrees today. ABC News.
There's a world of great sport content right at your fingertips with ABC Grandstand Online.
Visit abc.net.au/grandstand.
Get the latest sports results and stories and find out what's coming up with the broadcast schedule. Log on to abc.net.au/grandstand for sports coverage like no other.
Grandstand Sport.
It's on your radio, online, on digital radio and on your mobile.
Grandstand AFL.
Grandstand AFL.
Live and commercial free.
You're with Grandstand.
You are with Adam White and Lindsay Gilby on Grandstand AFL as we reflect back on the inductees into the AFL Hall of Fame from last Wednesday night. The inductees were Matthew Richardson, Anthony Koutoufides, Brad Johnson, Warren Tredrea, Andrew McLeod and Ern Henfrey. And we've already spoken about Andrew McLeod and Warren Tredrea. It's now time to reflect back on the career of Matthew Richardson. And before we go to his speech, which was a very popular speech, Lindsay, from Wednesday night, he played 282 games for the Tigers between 1993 and 2009, 800 goals, Richmond Best and Fairest winner in 2007, All-Australian 3 times, 96, 99 and 2008, and a member of Richmond's Team of the Century, but will probably go down as one of the most popular players, even if he didn't barrack for Richmond, in the AFL.
Yeah, correct. I remember the 2008 Brownlow medal. It got down to the edge of the seats, around 18, 19, and he was coming with a bit of a rush, and Adam Cooney was up there at the time, which obviously the guy I wanted to win, but I wouldn't have been upset if Matthew Richardson won it, and I'm pretty sure everyone in the boat felt like that. He would have been such a popular winner. It's interesting that he only ever won one Best and Fairest. You would think he would have won more.
Yep.
But the leading goal kicker in the history at the MCG, absolute star of a player and a quality individual as well.
Well, one of the themes from the speech with Gerard Whateley was the fact that Terry Wallace put him up onto the wing towards the end of his career, and I'm not sure whether it extended his career necessarily, but it certainly made him a better player, and we remember him more now as a more of a rounded player rather than just being that at times erratic, enigmatic forward that on his day was unstoppable but could be just as bad as he was often good.
I think it can invigorate you as a player when you played the one career, virtually sat in the goal square for 13 or 14 years and roamed up to around centre-half forward, but it's a new challenge, a new position. He can get up the side in the back 50. He can use his strength, and one of his biggest strengths besides his marking power was his running ability, and that's what made him such a hard matchup. And I spoke about Brian Lake before. If you ever got Brian hasn't got the biggest tank in the world, but he'd just run and run and run, and he was a tough matchup. And he'd go forward, catch it, score. The crowd would get behind him, and you could just virtually the crowd, here comes Richo, and he'd end up just plucking the ball from nowhere. He's a fantastic player.
He was athletic, he was emotional, he was an entertainer.
He wore his heart on his sleeve,
didn't he?
He?
Absolutely. Here he is, Matthew Richardson from Wednesday night, and his speech with our very own Gerard Whateley.
Because it was a long way, I'd say. I was getting nervous down there.
Where should we start? Should we start with the emotion of it all?
Yeah, look, I guess footy's an emotional game. You know, you ride that roller coaster every week when you play AFL footy, and I wasn't real good at disguising it through my career, but I guess that's what I fed off as a player. I fed off the crowd and the energy in the crowd and the emotion of the game, and you know, I felt I played my best footy when I was on the edge. Sometimes it boiled over too far, you know, but a lot of the time it didn't, and I played good footy when I felt that way. But I think my last 5 years I harnessed it. I took till about the age of 30. I was a slow learner, but I think I eventually sorted it out by the end. Yeah.
If you search the Vision archive of AFL and put in Richo upset, you come up with 140 beautiful hits.
Yeah, I must admit, I remember one particular Friday night, I think it was my 150th game. It was the only time I captained the Richmond Footy Club, and it was a goal of mine. It didn't happen for various reasons, and it's not a regret, but I put a lot of pressure on myself this night to go out there and play well, and we didn't play well, and I lost the plot and made a bit of a goose of myself. And I remember I got home, and it was in the times where it was a bit of a delayed broadcast. I went straight home, and they were wrapping up the game. I can't remember what channel was covering it then, but they were wrapping up the game, and they sort of showed a package of my emotion through the night, and I thought, geez, what a peanut, you know. I thought I couldn't even remember doing half of it, so I guess I just got the white line fever, as they call it, and it took me over the edge sometimes, but that's the way it was.
Yep. You're a great footballer and a great heritage. What did you know about your father, Bull, when you were growing up?
Yeah, look, my dad, Alan, who's here tonight, it's fantastic to see him here. He was a premiership player with Richmond in 1967. I never saw him play. I was always a Richmond supporter, obviously, from the moment I was born, but I guess I got my knowledge of his playing career out of scrapbooks. Mum and his mum, my grandmother and my mother had scrapbooks of Dad, and they were really good. They were comprehensive, and I just read them from back to front. I would have read them thousands of times. The only footage I've seen of him playing was the 1960 Grand Final against Geelong on the old VHS videotape. Yep. The tracking was a bit worn out by the end, but I could recount that game pretty well. So they were my memories of him as a player. I think my first memories of the Richmond Footy Club were the 1980 Grand Final, where we smashed Collingwood by a record margin. KB was best on ground with 7 goals, and I was 5 years of age, and I think I put it together at that time that, you know, Dad had played for the club, and we were the best team in the comp. We were winning the grand final. So from that day on, I always wanted to play for Richmond, I guess.
What an inheritance awaited. So you're always bound to be father-son, but somebody did try to talk you out of it.
Yeah, I guess from about the age of 16 onwards, I always thought that I'd play for Richmond, but when it got closer to the draft in 1992, Collingwood started showing a little bit of interest. They were ringing Dad and sending a few letters to Dad, and I got a box of gear delivered to home in Devonport in Tasmania. I opened up the box, and there was a couple of Puma tracksuits in there, a couple of pairs of runners. I got a copy of the 1990 Grand Final, Captain Courageous Tony Shaw, the Darren Mullane story, and I think they chucked in a copy of the BT Diaries for good measure. It didn't get me across the line. I wouldn't have minded a bit of cash, but
somebody rang. Who rang?
Well, I remember one Thursday night I got a phone call, and I don't know if Lee Matthews remembers, but Mum came into the lounge room and said, there's a phone call for you, Matthew. I said, yeah, who is it? She goes, it's Lee Matthews. And I said, I'll give us a spell. There's no way knowing Lee Matthews is ringing. But they did have a bit of a crack, the Pies. But I was never seriously going anywhere else bar the Tigers. I wanted to come to Melbourne. I always thought Melbourne was the heartland of footy. Growing up in Tasmania, which is another heartland, I wanted to come to Melbourne. That's where it was, and I wanted to play for Richmond.
You were impatient, and rightly so, because when you arrived, you kicked 6 goals in your 4th game, you kicked 56 goals in your 2nd season. Was it everything that you imagined it might have been?
Yeah, I was pretty impatient, I guess. I thought I should have played round 1 in my first year, and I was filthy when I wasn't selected. So I did put a lot of pressure on myself to perform, and I wanted it to happen pretty quickly, and I guess I thought I belonged pretty quickly. I felt like I could compete. I had a good running ability back then. I was pretty skinny, but I felt like I could run with the best, and I could get my footy that way, and that was how I did it early on. So, yeah, I thought I belonged pretty early on.
There were seasons of 90 goals, and there were all Australian seasons, and every time you really hit your straps and took the game by the throat, you were a jinxed figure. A knee into the fence, a couple of broken arms, a couple of broken cheekbones. Did you feel like the fates sometimes conspired against you?
Yeah, not really. I think actually one year I did. After 1999 I had a reasonable year, and I felt I played my best season in 1999, and the first 4 games of the next year I thought I was really progressing. I was 25 and I felt I was at the peak of, I guess, my physical ability, and I was starting to come of age, and I did my foot in round 4 and didn't play again that year. So that was really frustrating. It was hard to take because I knew that I was probably going to have a good year that year. I did my knee in 1995 when I was young. I didn't really think about it. I just did the rehab and got back out there the next year. But I think the most frustrating time for me was 2002, 2003. I think I did about 5 or 6 hamstrings. Just couldn't get out on the ground, and I guess I look back now and they were probably pretty wasted years. But everyone has injuries playing footy. I mean, that's part of it.
Every great story needs a late twist, and it
Yeah.
did happen with the move to the wing. Were you a believer in the move to the wing?
No, I wasn't. I can recount the story. It was after round 3. I think we'd been beaten by the Pies at the MCG. We hadn't played very well. I thought I'd started the year just average in the forward line. I walked into the club on a Monday morning and Terry Wallace said, "Richo, can I have a chat to you?" I said, "No worries." So I went into his office, Plough was Terry Wallace, and he said, "Look, I need you to do me a favour." I said, "Yeah, no problem. What is it?" He said, "Look, we've got a young player at the club now, Jack Grewalt. He's into his 2nd year. We think he can really play." I said, "Yeah, I agree. He can really play. He's from Tassie too, which is a bonus." I said, "What can I do? Do you want me to do some goal kicking with him maybe?" And he said, "Look, no, I don't." He said, I want you to move up onto the wing." And I said, "The wing?" I said, "I was thinking maybe back to the goal square, bearing the square type role. I can play back there for a long time in the goal square. Jack can do all the hack work up the ground, and I'll play back there. I'll be like Dustin Fletcher now. I'll play to 140 in the goal square." So I looked at Plough and I said, "So what are my options, Plough?" He said, "Look, you can play for Coburg." I said, "I love the wing. Get me up there." So I left the club that day and I thought, I'm done. Like, I'm 33 years of age. I've played in the forward line my whole life. My whole junior career I was in the forward line. I liked kicking goals. What am I going to do up on the wing? So I remember driving home and I rang an old mate, an old teammate who's here tonight, Wayne Campbell. He was working at the Bulldogs, I think under Rocket maybe at the time. I said, "Walker, Plough wants me to play on the wing. What do you reckon?" I'm done, I think. I'll have to retire in the next few weeks." And he said, "No, I reckon you'll go all right. You know, you've got a good running ability, just embrace it." So that's what I did. I went up onto the wing that week. We played in Perth, which is a good ground for wingmen, on Patterson's or Subiaco as it was. We had a good game and beat Freo, and I really enjoyed the rest of that year. But I did find out, I don't care what anyone in here says, it's a lot easier playing in the midfield than in the forward line.
And it all led to this room on Brownlow Medal Night 2008, which was a count unlike any other. The whole room was desperate that you had come up with those late votes to win the medal. What was that like to be in the middle of?
Yeah, I remember it being... I mean, when you go to the Brownlow Medal, when you get invited, you're never sure what's going to happen. You know, you can be embarrassed if you're sitting there on your table and you don't get a vote. And so I remember that's the first thing when you rock up. You just want to get a couple of votes. So I got a couple of votes early so I could relax. So I had a few beers and it got to round 20 and I think Simon Black, myself and Cooney were sort of neck and neck at round 20. And I really could feel the support in the room, and it was really humbling, and I'll forever be grateful for that night. But I remember thinking, well, I'm no chance, because the last 2 games of that year were my worst 2 games of the year, but Richmond actually had good wins. I think we won both games by 10 goals. So everyone in the room's looking at the form guy going, "Oh, Richmond have won by 10 goals. Maybe Richardson is a chance," but I knew I wasn't. And I didn't get a vote in the last 2 games, and Adam Cooney was a great winner that night. But yeah, I just remember walking away thinking, geez, I'm staggered by the support, and I was really humbled by it.
It finished in round 6 2009, so the following year, and it did finish in a very Richo kind of way.
Yeah, it did. I didn't play much more footy, as you said. The next year, round 6, we played up at the SCG against the Swans, and I'd been struggling a bit. The body wasn't feeling how it should. And I came out on the lead pretty early in the game. I think I was playing on Lewis Roberts-Thompson. went for a mark and I felt my hamstring go high up on the tendon, and I'd had tendonitis in my hamstring, so I knew it was struggling and I knew it was gone off the bone. The runner kept coming out. Are you right? Are you right? I'm like, yeah, I'm right. Just sweet, get back to the bench, will you? So he come out again. Are you right? Ploughs, you're not moving around. You're not presenting. I said, I'm right. Trust me. He came out again the third time. He said, if you don't start doing something, you're coming off. I said, it's okay. I'm right. I wasn't right. I'd done my hammy, but I was on 799 goals. And any good forward in this room knows how many goals they've kicked at any particular time. So I thought, I've just got to hang around out here to get one more goal. So anyway, the ball, Lewis ran off me and the ball got turned over. I was standing back on my own, took a mark and got the goal, which was 800, which sounded a lot better to me. And off I went. That was the end of it.
And still the Richmond Nation turns its lonely eyes to you nearly every week, Richo. Maybe a thank you or two to finish.
Yeah, firstly, I'm extremely humbled to be here tonight. I never thought, and I know the other guys haven't done notes, but I just don't want to forget anything. Yes, extremely humbled to be here and honoured that the AFL and the selection committee selected me to be in the AFL Hall of Fame. I would never have expected it when I started my career. Absolutely no way. I expected to play a few games, but certainly didn't expect to get this. I just want to congratulate all the other inductees tonight, all players, I guess, from my era, and all champion guys at the same time. And I'm privileged to be going into the AFL Hall of Fame with you guys. I really enjoyed watching you all play. I guess to the Richmond fans and the Richmond Football Club, we do cop a bit, and Mick summed it up pretty well. We've had our times, but I thought we were competitive in that era at some stage, but people forget that. But I love the support that I received from all the Richmond fans and all the football fans in general. So thank you very much to my three football clubs, I guess. The East Devonport Footy Club, where I first started. Dad was president there and coached the East Devonport Footy Club. Then I moved over to Devonport and played under the great Peter Knights, who's in this room. He was my first senior coach, and how good's that? You're 17 years of age and Peter Knights is your first senior coach. So I learned a lot off Knightsy, and it set me up to come over and play for Richmond, and I thoroughly enjoyed my 17 years playing at the club. Just want to thank all the staff and players and everyone involved in those three clubs over your career. It's impossible to mention, and I don't want to individualise because there's so many good people involved in all those clubs. But thank you, it was a great journey. To the people on my table, which are the most important people, to Mum and Dad, just always gave me unwavering support my whole career. As a kid, driving up and down the northwest coast of Tassie, Mum would be dropping us off, picking us up, whether it was, basketball, footy, whatever sports we were playing, she was always there and to pick me up. And to Dad, who was my inspiration to play football. I never saw him play, but those scrapbooks were the inspiration, and he was a great footballer, premiership player at Richmond, and he never offered too much advice. He's not a man of a lot of words, but the things he did tell me to do were to have my boots cleaned and nuggeted up. I did that. Got to have your socks pulled up, and you got to have garters on, so I did that. Got to tuck your jumper in, so I did that. It wasn't real trendy towards the end of my career, Dad. And he always said to keep your feet. He said, you've got to keep your feet as a player. He reckoned I was always on the ground like autumn leaves, so I tried to keep my feet, but I got long legs. It's not that easy, Dad. To my brother and sister over there, Samantha, she's just an amazing support my whole career. I admire you as a person, Samantha. You're an inspiration as a mother to your two little girls, Andy and Gabriella, and I really admire you a lot. To my brother, Andrew, sitting there, he was there every week after our family moved back to Melbourne. He's a massive Tigers fan now. He rides the emotion. And I'll never forget one day after a game, I must have had a bad game, and he rang up Talkback Radio and gave them a spray on the radio. Thanks, pal. I love that. My oldest sister, Tracy, who couldn't be here tonight, she's really busy with her work, with exams and stuff at the moment, and unfortunately couldn't be here, but thanks very much, Trace. To Jill, and Bob Lucas. Jill's here tonight. Unfortunately, Bob can't be with us, but they were like my home away from home. When I first moved to Melbourne, I lived with the Lucas family, and Jill was like a second mum, and Bob was like a second dad, and Bob was a William Leach medalist in Tasmania, which is like a Brownlow. And I remember the morning of my first game, I got up, and Bob said, "What do you want for breakfast?" "I'll cook you steak and eggs." I said, "We don't have steak and eggs anymore, Bob." Wouldn't sit in the stomach real well. To my auntie Robin, who's over here, a great supporter, and I love your lateral thinking, Robin, and I love chatting to you about things that are a little bit different. I think we're on the same wavelength at times. Thanks for your support. I've got my two best mates here, Simon Lucas, Jill and Bob's son. Grew up with Simon. He was my first hero. We played mini-league together. He was a few years older than me. He was always winning the best and fairest, so I had to try and win the BNF. I loved Simon as a mate, and he's been a great support through my career. Although when you had that permed mullet and I wanted to do that, I'm not sure that was a good idea, Simon. And Ben Harrison, my best mate, went to school together, primary school, high school, played Teal Cup together. We moved to Melbourne at the same time. Harrow went to Carlton, then he got traded to Richmond. Played at Richmond together, still best mates now, and it's great to have you here tonight, Harrow. Thanks for coming. And lastly, my girlfriend Jen, who only met me after I retired, and she thinks I'm hard work now. Well, imagine what I was like when I played, Jen. As Treader said, it was a different story back then. Just to finish off, Jen has been pestering me for ages to get a cat. And I'm like, I'm not getting a cat, okay? I think I'm allergic to them. I just don't want a cat in the house. Anyway, we got a cat. I said, if we're getting a cat, I'm naming it. That was the condition. So I named it Kev, and it's in honour of Sheedy and Bartlett. So thank you very much. Thanks for having us, and thank you.
So there was Matthew Richardson with Gerard Whateley after being inducted into the Hall of Fame. As I said earlier, Matthew Richardson, 282 games, all at Tigerland, and kicked 800 goals. Okay, we're going to go now to Anthony Koutoufides. Just quickly, a game has started in the AFL between the Gold Coast Suns and the Sydney Swans. Our match for broadcast will be from Subiaco between the Crows and the Dockers, but currently there's still 16 minutes remaining in the first term at Carrara. It is Gold Coast leading the Suns, Gold Coast leading the Swans. They have scored 2 behinds, and Sydney yet to score. Bright sunny conditions up on the Gold Coast. Anthony Koutoufides, Lindsay, what a great player he was for the Carlton Football Club. 278 games, 226 goals, 2-time Carlton Best and Fairest winner, 2-time All-Australian and the Premiership in 1995. We spoke about him a little bit earlier on in the program, but someone that was an athlete first, a footballer second, but was able to do both.
Yeah, you're right, and both ends of the ground and all over the ground. He was a midfield goal kicker, so back then probably wasn't as fashionable as what they are today. He would go on the wing, go inside. What I mean by inside is into the middle, go forward. Virtually just a guy could probably today's version of Nat Fyfe on a certain level. Nat Fyfe's probably got that little bit more X factor about him, but similar players. He was built. He could play all positions. He was a very, very good player.
We caught up with him on Friday night as part of our pre-match coverage to the Carlton Geelong game, and one of the great things about Kouta was his relationship with David Parkin. So here is Gerard Whateley, Anthony Koutoufides, and David Parkin from Friday night.
Parko and I probably didn't hit it off straight away, too well. Here came in this athlete, this guy from Laylaw. And it didn't help because my role model and idol was, not role model, idol, I loved Vanilla Ice. So I decided to get the 2 stripes in the side of my head, and I had the flat top with a mullet. So as soon as David Parkin seen that, he just came straight up to me and said, "You're not going to play AFL senior footy." So I knew I was in trouble, and I had to leave it on for a while. But Parko, after a few years of, I was really standoffish maybe, but he's a remarkable friend now. Whenever I see him, I have such a lot of respect for Parko, and he taught me so much about, living life, not solely football, but also outside of football and life after football. And that's what Parko was terrific at. And he was a fantastic role model for me. And, the life lessons that he's taught me that I can take with me forever, I still remember his words. Your pages of youth turn over very quickly, and it made no sense to me for many years until I was probably 25 or 26, decided to give Parko a call and said, Parko, I finally understand what you mean. And your footy career goes through so quickly and you don't realise as a young kid. And what he wanted from all of us was really to make the most of it. And that's what I was able to do because of his wise words.
That's Anthony Koutoufides as he was inducted into the Australian Football Hall of Fame on Wednesday night. And it's a great honour to welcome Anthony to Grandstand AFL. Cooter, good evening.
Jared, Parko, how are we?
How's it all settled? How's it feel to be a Hall of Famer?
Unbelievable. I don't know if it's really sunk in yet, but what an honour, obviously to receive that letter number one and then to be inducted Wednesday night. I've just been overflown with just incredible messages from so many friends and people I haven't spoken to in the past for a long time, and it's just been unbelievable. I feel as though I'm back playing again, and everyone's there, and now with social media and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, I can't keep up with it all.
What was the night itself like, surrounded by so many greats throughout the generations?
I think that's what blew me away, Jared, to go there. I always knew it was going to be a special night, but when you see some of the all-time greats there, so we talk about the elite of the competition, so thousands of players going through the system, and then to have this elite group there, the Hall of Fame, to me it was just an unbelievable feeling, knowing from where I came from as a young kid to where I ended up as a footballer. And as I said on the night, I would have been honoured just to have played one game representing the mighty Carlton Football Club. But to get through so many seasons and now be acknowledged and recognised as a Hall of Famer, it's just almost surreal for me.
I've got a very proud friend and mentor here.
And I don't, knowing you, you wouldn't have even thought about it, would you? You wouldn't have even considered that was something which was likely to be bestowed on you? Would that be fair? It came as an absolute surprise.
Throughout my career, do you mean, Parko? Or
even after your career and thinking about it, knowing that the Hall of Fame is available to great players. But I think I know you well enough, your personality. You wouldn't have even rated yourself inwardly as being someone who was going to step into the Hall of Fame at this stage.
No, I know there was people that had spoken about it and always in the back of my head would have said, that'd be really nice if I, would be inducted one day. But no, you know what, in the last couple of years, Parko, in all honesty, I haven't even thought about it. Last year, the night sort of came upon. I didn't even know who was there. People would text me, are you in? I'm thinking, in what? And then, obviously it wasn't me last year. So, yeah, I didn't think about it, and not for 1 second did I think this year I would have been inducted also,
It was an interesting, in reading your book, Anthony, I think I rang after about chapter 3 and I said, you've absolutely crucified me here. And you said, no, Parko, keep reading, it gets better. You might remember that conversation. But lovely, I was absolutely thankful for the kind words that you said about me, but more importantly, and you may be able to explain to our listeners, when you specifically mentioned both Barry Mitchell and Wayne Britton, you gave them the exact kudos, or whatever you call it, that I thought you should have. Can you explain the impact that they had on your football career?
Firstly I'll explain you, Park. Obviously, at the start of my career we probably didn't hit it off eye to eye. The serious guy, and I probably came in looking a little bit, laconic, and maybe it didn't look like I was trying too hard at times, and I found it difficult, I guess, to adjust maybe to the way that, your expectations on me. But once I learned to understand you as a person, what you taught me in life lessons, I can take with me forever, and I regard you, as you know, and we talk quite often, I regard you as an incredible friend and mentor and like a father figure for me. So for you, it may not have started well, but once I got to understand you and the person you were deep within yourself, then, you mean the world to me. And look, Barry Mitchell and Wayne Britton were just incredible mentors. I think Wayne Britton understood me and Barry Mitchell understood me in the way that I could play, and really just grabbed me in the way that I needed to and taught me little things about footy that I never thought of previously. And to that, I'm forever indebted to them, and still to this day, I speak to Barry quite a bit, in which I'll be honest, I've lost a little bit of contact with him. I tried a couple of times, and I'm not sure what he's doing. But, those two guys there, it's just something inside of me that, I can, every time I think of them, they put a smile on my face and think of the times that we had together as friends, but them to me as mentors and coaches at our wonderful football club.
Shall we play a little bit of relationship counselling here? David, did he confound you more than maybe any other footballer about where to play Cooter?
That's a fair question, Jared. I think, Cooter, I thought of you as an athlete who was playing football and not a basic football at the start. I think I drove you mad. We put you, if my memory serves me right, we probably put you at centre back to run round on very good players who take you the ball. We put you in the middle where the ball was and you're a great extractor and that, and then we put you up forward and bombed the ball on your head, and you were unbelievably good at getting it there. And then somebody, and I don't think it was me, but somebody had the genius of putting you on the wing, and you became our outlet player. We could confidently go to you under pressure, always in the back line. I think I remember against West Coast at Princes Park one day, you're taking 17 or 18 marks on the wing, and there was a stage where you then learnt to play the game. Is that a fair comment? It was the athlete playing footy, and then the footballer evolved.
Yeah, that was probably your perception and a lot of others too, Parker. Now, remember, I started the game at the age of 8, and I played under 15, represented Victoria, played 2 years under 15s at Carlton Scholarship Team, and then represented Victoria. I played 2 years under 19s at Carlton, played in the Till Cup, made the All-Australian. So I felt as though I came in as a footballer, but the perception was maybe I was more of an athlete. Now, I came from a position of playing ruck and in the forward line, and I came to Carlton playing in defence, and in 1992 I was at full back that year there to win the reserves list at first at full back. And, by the time I was playing senior footy, I was playing at half forward flank, on and off the bench, and I was, I guess, a little bit of a confidence player. And I can recall one game I literally ran on for a minute, and you sent the runner out and said, Parker wants to know if you actually want to play today. And I turned around and thought, what do I need to do to please him? But look, then when you played me on the wing, I felt as though I had that freedom in the way that I could play footy. And from that day onwards, I never looked back. And you played me in the way that, I'm always forever grateful for. And just let me play footy. I think when I felt a little bit strangled and unsure of, because I'd like to listen to the coach and I just wanted to always please them, that I couldn't get the best out of myself. But you did quite often play me on plays in a tagging role too, which taught me also a lot about the game, yes.
Describe Cooter for me, David, when he was in full flight for you. What could he do for you?
Well, at his side, it was just, when you think you're 6'4.5" or 5", Anthony? 6'3", with an athlete who was a Victorian high jump champion, who could run hurdles over 110 as quick as anybody else. He had the agility of a Jimmy Buckley at that size and shape. He was as good at ground level as he was above it, and he had pretty good finishing skills as well. So he had the capacity to do any role. And I think we might have got confused in the start, and I think Anthony's saying we never felt that he had a spot in the team that was his to go out and express himself and play. And it wasn't until somebody decided that if we put him on the wing that he could do that, and he showed he could go back and forward in the air and on the ground, and became one of the best in a time when we had the best midfield with Madden, Ratton, Williams, Brown. They keep coming out, Cooter at people in the middle. We dominated midfield clearances like no other team in the history of the game up to that point had done. And what people forget, that Anthony himself was an unbelievably good at winning. He put the hand over the top of the ball, the one hand. He could push players away and make his own space with the other hand, and he had the capacity to lift the ball then above everybody else and flip the hands out. People forget what a great handball he was to start the clearances from centre bounces. So he when he was up and going, he was the full package. And I've heard players that played against him had absolute nightmares as to how they were going to deal with him in all the aspects: ground, speed over the ground, aerial ability to go up, strength like very few players had core strength in those days. So he became an absolute, Ordonis, in the sense that people didn't know how to handle Anthony. He went from being one that we weren't sure where to play him to opposition not knowing what to do about him.
Okay, so that's David on Anthony in full flight. Anthony, what about David in full flight? Give us a little insight into what the coach was like.
Read chapters 1, 2 and 3 in the book.
The jugular vein was the one, wasn't it? Every time I feared Parker. He had these bright blue eyes, and he put fear amongst me and I'm sure a lot of other players in his time. But all he demanded, Parker, was for you to get the very best out of yourself. And I probably wasn't the greatest at that at the beginning. And I can recall Parker coming even into the gym and showing me up and the weights and what he could do, just to a true professional in the sense, no alcohol, looked after himself, healthy, active lifestyle that he lived, and just a very, very intelligent man. And what I did take for granted throughout my career was the fact that he was the most incredible speaker that I'd ever heard in my entire life. If we talk about motivation and getting the best out of players, Parker was it. And the day I realised that was the day that he left the club. And when, you didn't hear him for a little while, his pre-game, post-game, during the week speeches were the most incredible, things that I've ever heard in my entire life.
That's lovely. The camaraderie of it all, and Anthony, this was on full display at the night because on your table was Ange Christou. So not only in one man, but I guess it's encapsulated there as friendships for life that have come through your football career.
100%. The friendships that I've made throughout that club, are invaluable, and the respect I have for so many wonderful people. And it's not just solely players, and coaches. There's the staff around, your Bulldogs, your property street. Peter Shockman, who called me last night, who was our fitness, guru, and the list goes on and on from Cole Kinnear. Even John Elliott, to me, I loved him. I think he was the greatest president of all time. And there's so many wonderful people that I've met throughout who gave me incredible support at that wonderful club.
So, David, when one of your old players goes into the Hall of Fame, what's the sense of pride like?
I'm not sure that I've had too many, to be truthful, but it was super for me last night because I understand, and I haven't stayed close to all that many of my players, to be truthful. They got on and lived their lives without me. But Anthony and I, for whatever reason, I'm very thankful for the friendship that we have, and we share regularly discussions, their life discussions about his work and family and friendships and his travel and all that sort of stuff. And that's very significant. So I got pretty emotional last night, I must admit, and to have Anthony speak on my behalf in that manner, I don't think anybody's ever done that before publicly. It was pretty meaningful for me, I can tell you.
Yep, I can tell. So, Anthony, as we finish up, do you feel like that rounds out your whole football experience from when you started as a kid against your parents' best wishes to where you are now?
Yeah, I feel like that was the conclusion, the final chapter, and the shutting of the locker. And I do feel that way. And what an absolute blessing it's been for me to have played and represented what I believe was the ultimate and the best club of all time. And we got to experience some of the greatest days of my life that I will cherish with me forever.
One last one. If you had to nominate the 95 flag or the 99 preliminary final, Anthony, that would be very difficult. Which would you go for?
Oh, no, that's not difficult. The 95 premiership by far. And that was the absolute ultimate of my entire life, to win that premiership with all those players and everyone that we represented at that year. To go through that year only losing 2 games, mate, you could not have even dreamt of that. But that feeling there and what we took with us for the next 4 or 5 weeks afterwards, you felt like you were on top of the world.
Anthony Koutafeti is talking to David Parkin and Gerard Whateley on Friday night on ABC Grandstand, one of the Hall of Fame inductees from Wednesday night. Another of the Hall of Fame inductees is Brad Johnson. Before we go through his credentials, just a score update from the Gold Coast, and a really good game of footy, Lindsay, between the Suns and the Swans from what we've seen. Sydney have kicked the first 2 goals of the game, but Charlie Dixon has just kicked Gold Coast first, so it is the Swans leading 2-3-15 to the Suns 1-3-9. It's very quick.
Yeah, there's not a lot of defence at the moment. There's a lot of power running. Looks a lovely day up there. It's going to be a ripper game, this one.
It does look like Sydney have certainly brought their A game, so it'll be interesting to see whether the Suns can absorb that early pressure from the Swans. Okay, Brad Johnson, Western Bulldog, a teammate of yours from 1995 to 2010. He played at the Dogs, was captain from 2006 to 2010. He played 364 games, kicked 558 goals, 3-time best and fairest winner, the first in 1999, then in 2002 and 2006, a 5-time All-Australian, 99, 2000, 2002, 2005. In fact, it's 6. 2005, 6 and 7.
Captain in 06.
And a member of the Western Bulldogs team of the century. And you'd almost say he was underrated.
Going off that resume, yes.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, you look at that and you think, that's unbelievable. But when you think of him as a player, I don't think some people realise just how good he was.
And especially for the height and how as an athlete, we spoke about athletes before, he doesn't look like one, but he played like one and he ran like one, but he's got the footy smarts. His hands, I used to play a lot on Brad in intra-club matches, and even though it was an intra-club, you'd know you'd played on a pretty good player because he'd run you into the ground. Very, very strong. You'd throw big weights on a bench, and that's why he was so good in one-on-ones for his size, because he was so strong. He could use his body well. He's by far the best player I've played with.
Okay, and someone that you never really thought of as being a player that would ever be on the ground. He'd always keep his feet, and I think that was one of his keys to his success.
And his durability to play for that long. He was a midfielder. He started out as a midfielder. He started out as a tagger, actually, in mid-90s, and then he become an endurance beast, and at one a half forward, a very hard player to match up on, because he'd get up the ground, he'd get back, he'd go into the middle if he was getting sat on forward. He'd always get the best of defender, and I think there's one time he kicked 60 or 70 goals in a season, and from a half-forward flank. He was virtually our main key target at 182 centimetres.
He'd probably still get a game now for the Dogs in the forward line.
Yeah, he probably could.
We're going to hear from his speech now, and then he's actually going to join us for a few minutes before we head over to Subiaco. So here is Brad Johnson with Jared Waitley on Wednesday night.
Well, that 17-year-old, hard work and commitment. He knew a little bit. I wonder what he'd think about 364 games and a swag of all Australians and best and fairests and more than 500 goals.
It's bloody hard work, Jared, that's for sure. Look, I think it's... I was taught that at a very young age about, trying to work as hard as you possibly can at something that you love. And that's the one thing that I certainly did. I grew up following the Dogs. I just loved the game. I didn't start playing until I was 13 years of age. So look, from that point on, when I started playing, I just absolutely fell in love with all aspects of the game of footy, and it's something that I was able to take right through my entire career.
You are the quintessential Bulldog story. You grew up there. I can see you as a kid there with an autograph book. Was that you?
That was me, standing at the windsock at the far end at the Mount Mistake end of the Whitten Oval. And look, I love cheering on the Hawk who's here tonight. Steve McPherson was a boyhood idol of mine because of some of the development programs that I went through as a junior, and he was one of the coaches through that. Steve Wallace, Chris Grant. When I was about 14, he was kicking 50 goals as a 17-year-old in his first year at the Bulldogs. So just absolutely loved watching all those guys and standing there with my family enjoying it.
But you were in the age of the draft, so you could have gone anywhere. And in fact, in the lead up to that 93 draft, it didn't really seem like it was going to be the Bulldogs.
No, I spoke to a number of clubs, had a few come over to the house and a few speak to me individually on the phone as well. I think it was about 12 or 13 clubs in the end that spoke to me. And it was the night before the draft. Mark Kleiman, who was the main recruiter for the Dogs at the time, gave me a phone call, and I spoke to him for literally a minute, and he said, "How you going?" I said, "Good." He said, "Would you like to come to Dogs?" I said, "Definitely." And he goes, "Okay, see you later." And that was it. That was the extent of the conversation. And the next day was the national draft. I wasn't going to go along because I wasn't obviously sure at the time, as things happened pretty quickly as a 17-year-old, and wasn't sure whether I was going to get drafted or not. But I was influenced by the Western Jets to go along and be a part of the day, and my name was called out by the Dogs, so it was absolutely sensational.
Now, there's no end of the jokes that you and Rowan Smith have been on the end of through the years. He did a lot for you, including handing you your debut game.
Yeah, he did, because they played Geelong the week before the Bulldogs. It was Hawks' record-breaking game, so it was a big day for the footy club at Whitten Oval, and played the Cats, and Gary Ablett ran through Smitty and broke his collarbone on the wing at the Whitten Oval. So the following week, I was able to make my debut for the Bulldogs in replace of what turned out to be my best mate in Smitty.
You were a great on-baller, wingman, ruck rover. But the club needed you to play forward. What do we stand? 180.
We're pretty similar.
In an age where the full forward was still a brute, how did you make the transition?
Well, you saw Cooter before. He was playing on a wing. I had no chance against someone like Cooter with his size and strength. So look, I was pushed forward on the back of Terry Wallace. He spoke to me during one pre-season and said, "Look, we just need someone up forward, someone that can maybe catch the ball on a regular basis and hopefully hit the scoreboard for us." So that was something that I had to embrace. Brian Taylor was massive for me. Terry Wallace got Brian Taylor down, and I did just a mountain of work with BT in terms of just leading patterns and understanding where to go on the forward line. But for myself, I still train with the midfielders. I love to work hard and become as fit as I possibly could out there. So it had then helped me on match day. I'd train against the half-backers at our club. I knew I was probably fitter than them. So on match day, I had the confidence to go out against the opposition's half-backers, knowing that I could probably work them over at certain stages of the game. Whether it was a tall, I'd take him up. If it was a small, I'd go back to the square and try and lead out and catch it on him.
It's the third straight year a Bulldog from your era has been inducted. Chris Grant and Scott West and now yourself. It didn't amount to a premiership, but premierships can't be all that there is. Is that the lesson in this?
I think so. Look, ultimately, and Granty and Westy who spoke so well, and thanks Westy for those kind words. We went through a fair bit together, and Rowan was the other one as well. But look, when we look back, yeah, we made 2 prelims in 97 and 98. 97 we just missed out by a point. 98 Adelaide were just too good for us. They blew us away in the first quarter, and away they went. They had some pretty good players floating around at that time as well. And then from 2008, 9 and 10, look, we were right into those games, right up to it, right deep into the last quarter of each of those games, and it just didn't pan out for us at the right time. Maybe a little bit of luck may have gone our way, but it didn't. So ultimately, though, I walk off those games. Yes, we didn't achieve the ultimate of winning the next flag for the Bulldogs, but our effort and the way we went about those games, you walk off in some ways with your head held high, knowing that we as a group and as a team, which is what it's all about, we gave everything.
The striving was undeniable, and I know there's one night that lives in your memory in the lead up to the 2008 final series.
Yeah, look, it was our first finals campaign serious finals campaign for quite some time. A couple of years earlier when Rocket first took over, we made the finals, then missed out, and in 08 we jumped right up again, and we went out for dinner as a group, and it was something that you generally do in a team sport. We went to one of Darcy's pubs, and we were having just a bite to eat. After we'd finished, we thought that's it. The club put us on a bus and took us out to the MCG, and we sort of wandered out. It was a bit drizzly. We didn't know what was going on. We walked out to the southern stand wing, and standing out there was Charlie Sutton, and it was one of those things where the tingles automatically just roll down your spine. We were surprised as a group to be out there. Charlie had the 54 Premiership Cup, and it's just part of the motivation that clubs go through to try and get you to respond and get you up the following week to have a big win and final. And he was standing there. He presented me with the Premiership Cup, and he goes, "We've had our turn with this club. It's now your turn." And he turned to the team and said, "Team, it's your turn to strive for the next premiership." He goes, "We love celebrating it, but we need some blokes to come along with us and have some fun." And it was those sort of moments that live with you and are really special in your time at what was a fantastic club.
So settle the mystery for the whole football world. What did it take to wipe the smile off Brad Johnson's face?
A golf cart for one, which was quite embarrassing to be honest. Being hit by a golf cart driven by the man who taught me how to play Auskick, so I couldn't get too angry with Noel because he had such a significant impact on my early part in footy. But look, I missed a couple of goals after siren, Jared, which are disappointing as well. So look, I love it. I absolutely loved all aspects of footy, whether it was playing, whether it was getting out and going to school visits, whatever it was. I embraced it and loved it, and that was taught to me from all the senior players at the club at the time, especially the guys that I was really close with Grandy, Westy and Smitty. They really drove that through the group, and that was something that we then took on ourselves and tried to get through the rest of the group as well. And look, at the end of the day, there's the fun aspects of things. You ride the highs and lows, but it always comes back to why you play the game. It's for the love of it, and that's something that was never lost on us.
Oh, you shared that love with all of us across the journey. Maybe a few thank yous.
Thanks, Jared. Firstly, just thanks to the selectors for nominating me tonight. It's absolutely blown me away in terms of being up here and just seeing all the names roll earlier on tonight. You seriously can't believe that it has happened. Obviously, my family. There's a few here tonight. My wife, especially. She's been an outstanding support through my entire career. My beautiful children, Ella and Jack, who actually got the chance to, and some of the biggest things in my career was having the two kids come out in the ground with me a number of times towards the end and run through the banner and have a bit of fun. So that was excellent. So thank you very much, guys, for everything over a number of years. Brucey Cater, who's been a magnificent support, especially since I finished, and his wife Anna. But it comes down to the Bulldogs, and it was an honour and a privilege to pull on the Dogs' colours for 17 years. They teach you so much within a football club. They teach you about respect, accountability, a team-first attitude, loyalty, professionalism, all the things that we use in life in general. Most importantly, and regardless of the highs and lows of the game, they taught me to never lose the passion for the game, never lose why you ended up playing this great game of ours, and it was because of the love of chasing that little kangaroo leather around and trying to get as many kicks on the weekend as possible and help the team move forward. So regardless of how we're going on a weekly basis, that's what enabled you to get through, was the fact that you always come back and you always got over things quickly because of your love and passion for the game. So on saying that, to all the staff, all the players, especially the three that I've mentioned tonight, had a significant impact on me as a person and a player, and all the coaches. I had a few coaches, had 5 coaches along the way, but I've got Rodney Eade here tonight, who had probably the most significant impact on me as a player and now as a person outside of football. So thanks to everyone involved at the Western Bulldogs for those number of years. Look, at the end, it's fantastic to stand up here. The journey does go so quick. Cooter's mentioned that already. It's something that you enjoy along the way. But ultimately, I'd just like to also pass on my congratulations to all the 2 that have been inducted so far tonight, and everyone else to follow after the break. So thanks very much to everyone. Thanks.
So that was Brad Johnson on Wednesday night, now in the AFL Hall of Fame. 364 games, 558 goals. It is quarter time at Carrara between the Suns and the Swans. And Sydney, well, they started to get on top of the Suns towards the end of that quarter. Sydney 4-3-27, 15 points up on the Gold Coast Suns. A wasteful Gold Coast Suns 1-6-12. We're not far away from heading across to Subiaco for the game between Fremantle and Adelaide, but we've just been listening to Brad Johnson there, a teammate of Lindsay Gilby's. And Gilbs, you've got Jono online to congratulate him personally on the ABC Grandstand.
Yes, obviously, Bradley, I know you're down there in the lovely parts of Torquay, out there spraying a few pesticides in the back garden, overlooking your 50-metre lap pool down there that you've got. But just on behalf of an ex-teammate, and it only seems not far away, but yeah, fantastic career. And I said to Whitey off air, and I'd say it even on air, that by far the best player I've ever played with. Just the way he's conducted himself on and off the field as a family man. Just an absolute privilege to have played with you, Jono. And that's enough raps for you, mate. You've had enough this week, but well deserved. How have you found it since you've been inducted, mate?
Oh, thanks very much, Linz. It's fantastic to speak to you guys today, obviously, and I appreciate that, Linz. It's probably the kindest thing you've said to me in the last 20 years, so that's very kind. We had a lot of fun for so many years, and yourself, and obviously, sitting across from myself and Smitty and Westy, and then Boydie and Crossy and all those guys for so many years. We did have a lot of fun in the locker room, and not only that, but also plenty of fun outside of the game as well. So, and that's what the night's all about. Look, I had the opportunity earlier in the year to thank so many people at the Bulldogs Hall of Fame, which was a huge honour, and now to have it presented again at AFL level with that was just a huge surprise. It's still a bit surreal and something that I certainly cherish.
Just in regards to all your achievements, Jono, best and fairest, over 500 goals, all Australians, now all AFL Hall of Fame. But how does this rate compared to you're in the Bulldogs Hall of Fame, and compared to those individual awards? Obviously, we never got to win a premiership in that time, but does this rate above all those?
Oh, look, it sits equally with some of the other achievements along the way, Linz, and look, whether or not it's an All-Australian honour, or you might be lucky enough to get a best and fairest at the end of the year, or have an impact in some way throughout a season for the club. It all comes back to the way we are probably playing as a side at that time, And, we had some magnificent years with the Bulldogs for so many, and that was more the reason why I was able to start to benefit as a player, was because of the impact that we were having as a side, and some fantastic teammates that were doing their job week in, week out, and giving me some great ball coming forward, which made my life a lot easier, and the other forwards that were down there their life a lot easier as well, because of the significant amount of ball that was coming in, but it was the quality as well that went with it, and obviously you were one of those great players, Linz, that looked after me on a weekly basis, and that was the pleasing aspect for myself, the fact that as a team, we didn't achieve the premiership, but I think you'll agree, Linz, that we walk away from those years of playing some high quality footy that with no regrets, just a disappointment of not playing in a flag or playing in a grand final, but we certainly gave everything that we possibly could in those given games come finals to try and achieve the ultimate success for the Bulldogs.
Brad, thanks for spending a couple of minutes with us. Go back to the Garden now, and congratulations on the achievement. I think you're being, well, a little bit humble there. I mean, look at that. 364 games. I think you're always going to get into that Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Well done, mate.
Thanks very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of the weekend.
Thanks, mate.
Brad Johnson joining us there down on his farm at Torquay. That's it from us. I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of hours, just reflecting back on the modern players that have got into the Hall of Fame this week. We've also got to remember that Ern Henfrey also made it in. He was one of the 6. That's it from us. We're about to head now across to the west for the big game between Fremantle and Adelaide. Sydney have kicked the first goal of the second term. They lead by 21 points.
Coming to you live on ABC Local Radio and on ABC Grandstand Digital.
Grandstand Digital.
100% pure footy.
Pure footy. Pure footy. Grandstand AFL.
Wastes no time, turns and kicks inside the attacking 50. Turns and dribbles round another goal. Has 4 bounces, 40 metres out. He should bounce again. Doesn't have to bomb and goal. One of the highlights of the day. Reaches over the top, palms down. He's 65 out. Launches very long. Oh, that's an unbelievable goal.
AFL.
Tried to spin his way through, failed, gets hold of it. He had a breath of space, he didn't waste it.
100% pure footy.
Pure footy.
No one between him and the goals is there. He barrels a long goal. He doesn't wait for the whistle, plays on, goes for goal and kicks a beauty from 40 metres out.
Off the step, kicks across the body and drills the goal.
Gets towards goal, wins it in for the winner.
He can wheel around and just stroll in and kick a major.
He's from 60, he's whacked it on a path to goal and carried the journey.
Grandstand AFL on ABC Local Radio and on ABC Grandstand Digital.
Grandstand Digital.
The Adelaide Crows are the visitors to an overcast Subiaco Oval. They're looking to hit form after a really promising effort last week when Taylor Walker, he kicked 5 goals, and Big Tex was back on fire after a quiet return in his opening 2 games. And they face the Fremantle Dockers, who have been solid in their previous wins against Geelong and the Western Bulldogs, but still with an eye on the top 4. This is one of those games the Dockers have to win if they're to continue to push for a top 4 finish in season 2014. A very good afternoon to you. Clint Wilden in commentary this afternoon alongside Corbin Middlemass and our experts Ken Judge. And today we're joined by Brad Wirra. One late change to bring you up to date with for the 2 sides, and it comes from the visitors, the Adelaide Crows. Matthew Wright is a late out. He misses through concussion, failed the concussion test yesterday, so he's out, which means a debut for Cam Ellis-Yeoman. He'll become the 200th player to represent the Adelaide Crows and the 3rd Crow to make his debut in 2014. The Dockers make their way out onto the ground. They're about to run through the banner reading, clip their wings and they will fall. The Freo Dockers will stand tall. That's certainly what must be said, a rather small crowd at the moment here in at Subiaco will be hoping for this afternoon. The Crows already warming up to the right of our broadcast position. That's the Subiaco end of Subiaco Oval. It is a very early start to proceedings. The first 2-10 game here in WA in WST time this year. And Ken, maybe you suggested when you rolled up to the ground today, maybe a few people have been caught out by the early